He is the former Arizona Cardinal GM Steve Kiem. You can check out Draft Night Live, Fox Sports Radio, iHeartRadio app, coming up Thursday at 8 Eastern through the first round of the draft. You'll have Steve there with Jay Glazer and LaVar Arrington. Rob Stone will be your host, pick-by-pick predictions, reactions to every first-round pick. Steve, let me start with, first of all, thanks for joining us. What you think Arizona will do with the number 3 pick? What would you do if you were still the GM of the Cardinals?
Well, I think the situation that they're in right now, Dan, I think that there's a good chance that they would trade back. That being said, it's easier said than done because of the situation. When you're sitting there at number 3, you have to have a trade partner. Obviously, the trade has to work for both parties, and there has to be a player that the other team wants to come up for. So generally, that's a quarterback at that point in time, but if they get locked in, I think that they should probably go pass rusher, and Will Anderson, to me, is the pick there.
Okay, but when you're trying to explore a trade like that, are you thinking about the other team? Have you ever gone into a trade trying to fleece somebody?
I mean, obviously you want to come out on top, but at the same time, the other team to make that trade has to have a lot of urgency to them, especially to come up to that position and to give up that much draft capital. So to me, it's not as hard.
Yeah, I wonder about that with GMs. We heard both GMs yesterday with Green Bay and also the Jets. You know, they were complimentary of each other, that they got a deal done. Your reaction, let's start with what the Jets gave up to get Aaron Rodgers. What did you make of that side of this trade?
I thought when you sit there and you're in a position that the Jets are in, and Joe Douglas is looking at a football team that's extremely talented but doesn't have a quarterback of that magnitude, I think that you got to get what you got to give up is well worth it. Again, I always think this, Dan, when you wake up in the morning and you have a quarterback that you think can take you to the promised land, do what it takes to get them. And there's probably only 8 or 9 guys in the NFL that you wake up feeling that way about. And if you're the Green Bay Packers, obviously you get a lot of draft capital, but at the same time, you're sitting there saying, who is our franchise quarterback moving forward? And if it is the young man that's currently there, why didn't you make that change prior to this point in time? You know, you drafted him in the first round, so there has to be some questions of whether they have the amount of confidence in him.
Yeah, I would have moved on from Rodgers prior to last season. Even though he's played great, I have to find out if Jordan Love can play and where is this franchise headed. And it felt like Rodgers was controlling the franchise instead of the other way around. And it felt like he had too much power in there. But you don't want to be known as the GM who traded away Aaron Rodgers unless you really know what you're going to have. And what would your expectations be for Green Bay this year?
Well, you know, again, I think it comes down to what is their confidence in the quarterback that they have in Love. You know, it's, again, they know enough about him. He's been there long enough. Obviously, Matt LaFleur knows how to use him and has a good way of understanding his strengths and his weaknesses. But again, at the same time, they're in a situation with the salary cap and moving on from a player that, you know, they can clear that much space with, that they have to be thinking a little bit that they're going to the youth movement, which for them, to me, has to be a situation where they can't be as confident about making the playoffs.
But the Jets don't make this move unless they think they can win a Super Bowl.
Is that right? You have to,
right?
But again, it's like the movie Tin Cup. When you're in a situation where you're Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh, you can't lay up anymore, Dan. You're in a position where you got to make something happen, particularly in a market like New York.
What was your scouting report on Rodgers?
I mean, he had all the talent in the world. I mean, off the charts in terms of his accuracy, his velocity, all the things you saw him in an NFL player.
But what did you try to make him do? What would be his weakness?
His weakness would be sometimes getting careless with the ball. A guy that has so much confidence in their arm talent that they can let it get away from him at times and play a little loose. But at the same time, I know at that time there were a lot of questions about why Alex Smith went number 1 and he fell so far.
Do you remember your scouting report on Jordan Love, or did you even have one?
Yeah, I mean, I thought he was a guy that you could project and you could forecast that there was some talent there. But to me, looking at all the other top quarterbacks that I've done over the years, he wasn't a guy that I thought was a guaranteed lock as an NFL starter.
So you didn't have a first-round grade on Jordan Love?
No, we didn't.
Take me back to the Kyler Murray. Do you remember when you saw him with me in my interview I did with him at the Super Bowl in Atlanta? And did that impact you? Like, what was the conversation like when you saw him not answering any questions, and really kind of an embarrassing moment.
Yeah, I mean, I know he was overwhelmed at that point in time, and that was important for us after seeing that to get to sit down and know him as a person and to be able to feel like he could become himself and, really wonder why he got so uptight in that situation. And again, I think that throughout the process, we got to know him fairly well. It was an interesting conversation when it came down to whether we were going to take him or Nick Bosa, which has turned out to be a phenomenal player. And that's the fun process of the scouting game, is the evaluation part of it. And not just who's a better player, what's a better fit for your organization at that point in time.
If I gave you a do-over?
Well, Kyler Murray got me an extension. Nick Bosa probably would have got me fired.
Really?
Well, I mean, your quarterback position is the guy who can propel your team the quickest.
Yeah, but
and he did that.
Okay.
Could Nick Bosa have got us to an 11-win team that year 2 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. That's fair. Would you have given him that extension if I gave you a do-over?
Yes.
You would?
And it's because I still believe in the young man, and because supply and demand at that position, either you have one or you don't. And whether they all have questions and holes, you have to be able to, you're either in or you're out. You can't play the middles on these situations.
Well, I was critical of you guys because I thought you went in a year early. Like he called your bluff, and then you guys gave him a pretty damn good contract.
Right.
And I'm just not sold on him. I think he's exciting. I think football came easy to him because he's athletic. Right. But look, you guys put something in his contract we need you to understand there are a lot of everybody's great in the NFL.
Right.
And who came up with the idea to put a clause in there basically saying we need you to do your homework?
Well, I'll just say it's an organizational decision. And the real big thing about it is when you give that kind of money, Dan, you got to hold people accountable. And I know it's a touchy.
But you shouldn't have to put it in their contract, though, Steve.
Right. Well, there's a lot of things in contracts that maybe you shouldn't have to put in there, if you really look at the big picture. But you got to hold everybody accountable, and both sides are protected.
You think he's still a franchise quarterback?
I do. I think he's got, because again, you have to look at supply and demand. And I keep going back to that. My first year as GM, I traded for Carson Palmer, and obviously it worked out extremely well for a 7th-round draft pick. And then after that, when you don't have Carson Palmer anymore, it's easier said than done. Then let's go get one. Joe Douglas, until he's gotten Aaron Rodgers now, what were they doing? It's 8 quarterbacks, and then really, it's a game of musical chairs. There aren't enough good quarterbacks out there. That's the bottom line. You have to swing.
Okay, how many quarterbacks have a first-round grade? Not that we'll go in the first round. How many this draft?
In my opinion, in this draft,
yeah.
Three.
First-round grades on 3. Okay.
Correct, but there's going to be more than 3 go, and that's going to be because of supply and demand.
Yeah, there'll be 5 that'll probably go.
Right.
I mean, Hendon Hooker's 25 coming off an ACL, and he could go to Minnesota late in the first round.
And you got to understand, when we did the Kyler Murray contract, we took him number 1 overall. He fit what Cliff Kingsbury did schematically. And at the end of the day, he was a Rookie of the Year and back-to-back Pro Bowl player, back-to-back All-Pro. I know that's not everything, but it's pointing in the right direction to give you the faith that he's going to get there.
What did you see in Josh Rosen?
Josh Rosen was a guy that, again, in that draft class, all those guys that went before him were highly graded, and we got to the point where we were sitting at 15, and he was the highest rated player at that position on the board. So again, if you don't take one, you'll never know, and sometimes you just have to swing. And we all know, whether it's a quarterback or not, first round picks, analytics say the last 10 years that 49% of those guys don't work out. That's a huge number.
Yeah.
That regardless of position, whether it's and considering the best position on the field, that's most important. 49%.
Give me your red flag on the field, though, at that position.
Or that player in particular?
No,
just that ability. It has to be nowadays ability to process and see things, to be able to anticipate. A lot of these guys, the more that we see, are guys that are athletic players that can get out of trouble with their feet, comparable to the past. Well, they still have to be able to process, see things, and be able to anticipate. And that's harder to find, and it's harder to see it as an evaluator than it is to see the physical tools.
Yeah, I was wondering that you have tests now, this new test that's not the Wonderlic, but it is testing in real time how you react to seeing something. But There are a lot of people who love Josh Rosen because he had some swagger and had that unbelievable comeback at UCLA. Why didn't he work? I mean, I felt bad for him because the offensive line did not do him any favors. But what did he miss?
Yeah, that's a great question. And really looking back at it, sometimes he had all the tools. He's a smart guy, very intellectual. But sometimes it's the commitment off the field, whether it's the time with his teammates on the practice field. Whether it's the fact is he a football junkie? Does he do it because he likes it or because he loves it? And to me, that's the thing that separates the great ones.
Yeah.
Is the fact that they're either obsessed and they live for it, or do they do it because it's something they're pretty good at?
Well, that's why I wonder about Tom Brady. Was Tom Brady destined to be a great quarterback, or did he become a great quarterback because he was consumed with the game? Peyton was going to be a high draft pick, first-round pick, 1 overall, had lineage there, but he also consumed the game.
Yeah.
It meant everything to him. Trying to measure that, Steve, how difficult is that to find out just how much this guy loves playing football?
Right. And I think you nailed it on the head, Dan. I mean, if you're the first pick in the draft, you were destined probably to be it as long as you have the obsession and the will to want to. But if you're a 6th-round pick, you just nailed it with Tom Brady. I mean, I think he willed himself to become a great player and one of the best of all time. It wasn't like he was drafted because of his physical skills.
No, it's weird that you can kind of make yourself into being a great player at that position. It's how much time are you going to put in? Bijon Robinson, I love him. I don't know in today's NFL, like how much can you love him at that position?
Yeah. Well, again, just to date back to the analytics, and our analytics team in Arizona told us that the best backs that had the most success in the NFL were drafted between rounds 3 and 5. So as an NFL GM, you want to be very wary, I think, of taking a guy that high. Yet at the same time, there have been some special backs like Adrian Peterson that warranted that high of a pick. It's just, can you get your arms wrapped around putting a player that plays that position and takes that kind of abuse? And generally, those guys don't last beyond 1 or 2 contracts.
Yeah, but you know what? That's a different era with Adrian Peterson. I mean, we're seeing Derrick Henry as sort of the last, he's a dinosaur here. Everybody else, that's why I like Bijan Robinson. And a scout told me if you can make him into a Deebo Samuel type, where put him in the slot, McCaffrey type, like that's where we're going. We're not loading up running backs, and you're going to run 25, 30 times a game.
Right. And that's the one thing as an evaluator, you have to assess and individually say, is that what makes that guy special? When you do watch Bijan Robinson, he does look like a natural slot receiver when he does that. And he does have all those other compensating factors to his game.
Yeah, he's a fascinating talent. How real is the movie Draft Day?
It's actually probably one of the most accurate movies I've seen that, in regards to NFL football and general sports. It's well done.
What makes it so accurate?
I just think the storyline and the way the conversations go behind the scenes. I mean, other than the fact that Kevin Costner is a lot more handsome than I am.
But you're asking about this quarterback of why nobody went to his party. Like, would you actually try to find those things out?
I mean, that is a huge red flag. Yes, it really is. And there are things that do come up like that are real head shakers. And it's why the draft process is so fun, because here we are so late in this process, Dan, and we've done all this homework.
Yep.
And it's really the season to overthink. It's like you fall in love with a guy in the fall, and then you confuse yourself in the spring.
And you see these GMs and owners, like how difficult is that when you do your job? Like Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones, the owner, Jerry Jones, the GM. 2 different people. And you almost have to say, Jerry, let me take care. Because he wanted to take Johnny Manziel. The GM wanted to, Jerry, the GM wanted to take Johnny Manziel. And you're like,
yeah.
So how difficult is that you do all this work and then you're going to have somebody above you that goes, I want that guy?
Well, that can happen. I think, in most situations when you're the general manager, you should have a good enough relationship with your owner where you sort of set those conversations. They start much earlier. And generally the ownership is on board with those sort of decisions, and they're made together. But at the same time, and again, that's what's fun about this thing. It's because you never know how it's going to go. Again, we haven't played football since January at the college level. Why are guys' stocks rising and plummeting? Because they ran a slow 3-cone?
No, you know what it is? Mock drafts. Mock drafts build these kids up to a certain level, and then once the professionals come in and start getting to see them breaking stuff down, then they start to drop. So is C.J. Stroud dropping, or is he going to end up where he should? The media put him up that high.
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, it goes back to what's the evaluation on him? And at this time of year, they sort of stay strong inside the war room. It's the outside part of it that he's dropped. Now, again, the problem for GMs is you got to make sure that you stay out of the fray there. You got to keep tunnel vision. You can't listen to all that because you will overthink it if you don't.
Have fun on Thursday.
It's like you said, I'm sitting there getting ready to make a decision. I love this quarterback. Why in the hell did nobody go to his party?
Did you ever have a red flag like that with a player, without the name, where you found out something like that?
Yeah, I mean, and it was a red flag like this. I had a very close friend on that staff, and I was going to take this player with a very, very high pick. And I'll never forget the night before the draft, I called him just to make myself feel better one more time. And I said, Coach, is there any reason if you were me why you wouldn't do this? And he said, and I right then, Dan, said, oh, boy, I didn't need him to do that. I wanted conviction to him say, hell no, take him.
Is he signaling to you without telling you?
Yes.
Because he doesn't want to be, you don't want any paper trail where he's ratting out a player. So it's,
correct.
Yeah, okay. So,
and in this day and age, don't ignore red flags.
Can we guess the name of the player?
No.
Okay. Have fun on Thursday. If you and Glazer get into a wrestling match, who's winning?
Glaze.
Yeah, I bet.
I've been on vacation, man. I'm way too out of shape.
Yeah. Glazer, he's ready to go in the octagon. Yeah, he breaks stories and breaks necks. Have fun on Thursday night, Steve. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dan. Enjoyed it, man.
Steve Kiem, former Arizona GM, Draft Night Live on Fox Sports Radio, iHeartRadio, Thursday night, star-studded. It'll be Jay Glazer. It'll be Steve Kiem. It'll be the College Football Hall of Famer LaVar Arrington. And the popular Rob Stone will be your host, pick by pick, and predictions as well. Glazer usually knows what the pick is going to be before the pick, right? Does he reveal?
Yeah, I've sat with him on draft night before, and his phone, he's getting them 3 or 4 minutes before the commissioner goes up.